Hushidar Mortezaie, or Hushi, is a fashion designer, artist, and activist based here in the Bay Area. Born in Tehran, Hushi immigrated to the Bay Area in 1975. His designs are inspired by his Iranian heritage and revolve around themes of gender politics, mass consumption, celebrity culture, and more. His designs have been featured in publications like Italian Vogue, worn by Beyonce, and many more. And just last month, he hosted an event at the DeYoung Museum as part of their Contemporary Muslim Fashions exhibition, which is currently on view now. He has kindly brought over some of his designs and prints. He has a lot of wonderful photos to share with us, so I will now allow him to speak more about his work. So, thank you so much for coming.
Just as I am so sorry, but I always bring a truckload of stuff, and I wanted to have something special for you to actually look at too, in person. So, should I talk over?
Yeah.
Here? Okay. So, I just have to say I am so happy that you're here, and everyone, because it's a dear friend. I always felt that I was occupying this other space that was invisible to other people, and so what I was very into like the culture of, high fashion at a very young age, and my father was an amazing person in my life. He was in Iran. He was basically a member of the Tudeh party. He was very to the left, and we had to leave Iran because of his politics, and also because my mom wanted a better place. And with his kind of like upbringing and his kind of rearing of like humanity and like art and culture and all these things being very important to me, it helped me be able to fit in a little bit more. And I grew up in Marin, and so politics was very important to me, but also fashion and play and glamour. So with all that aside, I started doing self-expression through outfits. And at that time, we just made things, and it was kind of in the early 90s, and it was about the underground club movement. We didn't call it performance art because we weren't doing it in a gallery, but our forefathers were Lee Bowery, and the list goes on. And so I, at the time, was very into anime and manga, and that had to do with things that I saw as a very young child in Iran. And so that was kind of me being able to express myself through finding my space where I belonged. And so this is me right here on the bottom, and this is my best friend, Michael. And we met, and we had we met through actually this woman here, so it's a special thing for me right now. We would create like these outfits and these headpieces, wigs, and just for ourselves. And they were really like pop performance art. And basically for me, this was being in that space of alien and transformation. And so this helped me kind of discover like these facets. And I kept going through these different changes of identity and altering. And so basically I've transformed myself into like a bubblegum Sailor Moon, and it was very liberating at the time for me. And through this I became a buyer for Patricia Field, and I basically traveled the world. I brought anime and manga and Hello Kitty through her stores, and that's where she was my mentor, and I learned a lot from her. So basically, going forward, I would have all these collections, and each collection had a theme, and they were political in nature, because I grew up very political in nature, and so was my friend Michael. So it was an East and West combination, and we would go through different themes. One of them was it was a porno collection, and it was where Giuliani had basically he was trying to clean up 42nd Street and Times Square. And that was the beginning of gentrification in many ways. So I protested through that, and I went to all the bookshops, and I found all these vintage pornos, and we did a collection that had all this porn, and it ended up in Fight Club. And so basically, that was kind of the culture that I was used to. Like, that was what was glorified at the time, but it was a reaction to against his cleaning and purifying. It took me a little while, like I would go through transformations, personal transformations of hair, contacts, all that kind of stuff, to where I kind of got exhausted of searching, and I was like, wait a second, I was reared with this incredible heritage and childhood and taught so much about it, and that became more interesting to me. And during that experience of, like in the late 90s, when you were Iranian, you had to change your name. People changed their name to Muhammad, or a lot of the art had to do with exile. I didn't have that feeling about Iran. For me, it was a celebration, it was a joy. My family reared me to be proud of it. And so the hostage situation would happen, and I would be called a terrorist in the second grade, and I was a very docile child, and I would fight with these like big, tall kids. So that kind of spirit grew up in me. And so through this experience, I really wanted to start talking about the role of women and the role of being Iranian and Muslim and gay and into fashion, and the way that the media portrays Iranian people, especially at that time in the late 1990s. You know, Bush was in office. It was basically you were either the oppressed or the oppressor. And women that were Iranian, they were just thought of as just these black cloaks. And for me, I just didn't believe that. I didn't understand that, because I grew up with powerful women, and my mother would pray, but she was a feminist. So it was a very different experience than what was the kind of media landscape. So I had gotten to this point where I really had this longing to go back home, and that also reflected the space of the other and being the third space, because I didn't feel I belonged, because I was not Iranian enough to be in Iran or to be with Iranians, but I wasn't American enough because I looked different. And so that led to me having a bit of anger, because I was tired and exhausted of the way that, Iranians were portrayed. So what I created here was basically my first actual collection with Michael. And this was called We Will Not Submit. And the idea was to take, what's important for me to say is that the first time that I went to Iran was during that time period, and that was a gift to me. In 1999, it was the first time after 20-something years. And when I went back, I saw all the political art on the walls, the murals, the shaheeds. I saw the way that the youth loved fashion, and the way they wore their hijab, or the way that they would posture and preen. And I saw that as self-expression. And that was quite a long time ago. And I had a feeling that basically fashion was going to be this political revolution. I wasn't sure about that, but I just felt like the way that they basically look more amazing than Harajuku children, and how they put themselves together, and the way that Iranian youth had to deal with the fashion police, or Irshad, and how they were risking their lives to have freedom. And so there was a duality there of the laws of the systems of control over there and the systems of control here. So this, for me, was kind of taking the imagery of those like revolutionary images and freedom fighters, but giving them to women. Because women, for me and my mother and all the Iranian women around me, they were Wonder Women. They were powerful, they were strong, and they were Amazons, and also they were glamorous. So it was basically, this idea was an answer, response to you're a terrorist, you're not worthy. So basically, I take a mirror to that imagery, and then it becomes armor, and they are like, so what? This is who I am, and this is what I'm about. So it basically crosses gender politics in very many different ways. And at this time, there was no work that was what I would call this new Orientalism. I had a little store, And people would come in and say, I want you to meet this woman named Shireen. And I didn't know. I was just doing my work in this store with my best friend, and we were making stuff that we were into. And then I saw this image of this Iranian woman with a gun, and I was like, wow, this is like so similar. So I didn't know that this was going to turn into something, and it stayed with me forever, because being Iranian has been difficult in this country forever, and it's difficult there. So just to talk a little bit more about this, I was raised in the book center, if anyone knows where that is, because I was a red diaper baby, and that's basically this famous bookstore where all the like kind of very left of center, like my father and all my father's friends, and that's where they were the comrades and they met. And I grew up with books that were like Palestinian children throwing stones, and I learned about all this stuff at a young age. So that the cause of Palestine was always very important to me, and that caused the fight for freedom, but not in a way that was one-sided, but it was just that quest for freedom. So I incorporated that fabric, but then I used lace, and I printed these images that were very considered in this country. They would call it war. And for me, it was like, there's nothing war about this. I took like images like where they would wear the red headbands, and I would make them, instead of saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, it would say Bokosham o khoshgelam kon, which was kill me, make me beautiful. But then on a sleeve, it would say, on the lace, it would say death to imperialism. So it was all these slogans that are thrown at women and how they're basically commodified and objectified. But then they use that as armor to go back to say, and here we are. So that's kind of the idea of we will not submit. It kind of speaks to the systems of control of the East and the West. And I made the shoes, we made everything. And to have an American friend do this with you was an incredible experience. And at that time it was new, so it was very exciting. The one thing I really want to talk about before I go into the rest of my work is hijab. And we've come to this point where everything has become about hijab. Hijab should not be mandatory. That's a given. It shouldn't be. But people have the right to choose it. In Iran, women are over the topic. They need to have the freedom. But the art world and the fashion world, they orientalize and they seduce and they put us in these pigeonholes where when you're an artist or you're a Muslim woman, you're just fetishized for having hijab. It's just done. It's over with. It's not like a big topic that everyone needs to discuss. Women in Iran are very cosmopolitan. Yes, they have. There's a lot of issues, and there's just a lot of issues here. So I think that was important for me to claim that, because I am a male, even though I occupy this space of the other. It's important that it's not a woman talking about that, but it's also me who identifies with this, and those youth in Iran, and how those girls especially, they're at the forefront of revolution, and this is an homage to them, and they're very glamorous too. So if you know Iranian women, they're very current and glamorous, so it's kind of a conversation on all those topics. So it was important to me to talk about this. This was 2001. This was my first runway collection, and I was never about commerce. I didn't understand commerce. It was about art. So I think, so as we enter the space of the other, I started to learn about Kadjar. And the way in Kadjar society and dynasty, they were very androgynous. And I was very androgynous.
Can you say just a little bit for people who are not familiar with
Yeah. Thank you. Sometimes I think everyone knows this language because I'm surrounded by everyone that it's boilerplate. Kadjar is basically the 18th century, it was 16, 17, 1800s of Iran, and they were a dynasty that was very opulent, and they would stain the middle of their eyebrows with silver nitrate to further pronounce their unibrows because it was a beauty standard. And the women often had mustaches. And the men were, some of the men, they were in Iran, in the Persian Empire, it was the high heels, men wore them. The first high heels were from Iran. And so that idea of me as a child seeing these like men with roses and birds and makeup, and then women that were like wearing tutus, because the Kadjar dynasty, they would go to Europe and they would mix like Middle Eastern fashion and then Western fashion, and it looked so intense because they would make themselves pale, they would wear a tutu with a Victorian jacket, and it looked punk, it looked very modern at the time. I collaged all these images from Kayhan Varzashi, which was a very well-known athletic magazine, and also political ads, and what's important in my work is the sense of humor, because I do believe that you have to kind of play, because life at this point for all of us is kind of a joke, so we need to laugh a little bit, you know. So of course I put the balding ads, and because I do a lot of work with branding, because we're all brands now, every one of us is a brand, and so this was very emotional for me to create this, and so I basically had the fabric. I changed all the faces, and this says in Farsi, it says Pahlavan, and Pahlavan means champion, and champion can express any state of being. For this, I was talking about soccer. I was also talking about the male gaze and reverting the gaze on them and masculinity, but I was also talking about sexuality in Iran and how it's, you know, it's very understood in the culture, but you also can be executed. So it's a very strange line that you have to cross and deal with. And as I started, like, in the social media age, I would get all kinds of comments and questions from youth in Iran that are LGBT, and I felt that was important to talk about this. So this is the Brotherhood. This is a photo that it actually just won a prize, which was really amazing, but it's really about standing up to the face of adversity for being who you are and inhabiting a space that might not be recognized, whether it's the East or the West. So that was a wonderful thing for me, and it's about Iranian youth and how they have to cross through all these boundaries just to have basic things that we take for granted here. But saying that, they have everything there, because let's see what. So just recently, I started working with Iran. Because I'm pretty much out in the media, I cannot go back. That's devastating to me. So, and that's because so much of my life has been about that. And I'm here constantly pining away and trying to discover this place that I left when I was 2, and I have these fantastical ideas about, but then I know all of the hardship and horrificness, and I couldn't be gay exactly in the way that I could be here at this moment. So I started working with these photographers and stylists, and they contacted me, and they were doing this shoot, and I had to go through this whole ordeal because of the sanctions, to have this work, to get to Iran. It couldn't get there. So I didn't know what to do. No one would carry it. I couldn't send it there. It was blocked. This magazine just came out. And so I trusted them to make it. So for the first time, I had clothing made in Iran. And from that, I started working with Iran. So it's basically giving a fuck you to sanctions, because I'm not touching anything. And it goes to them. And in the beginning, I want the work to just be there. I don't want the money. It belongs there. That's where it's home. So this just came out, and this was a story in Indie magazine about Afghan youth. And that's another space. And Afghan youth in Iran, and how they're completely prejudiced against, and really they're marginalized in an extreme way. And because of economic crisis in Iran, due to sanctions, due to geopolitics, money is tight everywhere, and it is here. So they have to struggle. So in this photo shoot, we've worked together through Skype and everything, and we found all these boys that work as in the shoe factory, they're builders, and they wanted to be models, a lot of them. And so we thought that it was just beautiful to show them in this space with 30 Iranian designers, and I was the only one that was able to be from here, and that was very special to me. So they're just lounging. He's wearing the Pahlavanti. I think there's like, and then it's very much going back to my 1990s rave roots, and it just was it was really an incredible moment for me to have this come out, and it basically took me and my father to Iran when neither of us could be. So I think I at first when I was coming here, I was like, oh my God, am I going to talk about jargon? And then I thought about Persis, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to talk about like art intellectualism. It just needs to be from the heart. So there's, this is low, but this image is incredible. I wish I could blow it up bigger, but they're wearing all different, these are 3 builders, and they're wearing some traditional Afghani clothing. So it really speaks to their experience in Iran. Because in Iran, Iran to the Afghani like immigrants, that's the great state. And so it's just layer upon layer and layer. And so
where are the clothes being made?
In Tehran.
In Tehran.
Yeah,
so
and
you have a connection there.
It was
like
totally
in the printing of the fabric.
The printing of the fabric. Well, I mean, obviously, I send them a digital file, and I haven't crossed it to be like some huge like commodity. It's not about that. It's about it just being there. Because
It's cool that it's being made.
It's really cool that it's being made there, because it's I want to go there. I can't go there. So, but I want to give this to them, because every day I get a message, where can I buy this? And I'm like, well, no one else wants it, but like maybe I should just give it away in Iran. So so the slides are a bit out of whack, but I want to like actually talk about this. This was the first collection that I did, and it goes back to women and the empowerment of women and how important that is. And it's so weird to see that because that was so long ago. So they were all sitting on carpets, on prayer rugs, and then the models stormed by and they had their unibrows, and it was really interesting to see, because now we're seeing that. And what's amazing for me is that work that I did 20 years ago, all these young kids are doing, and for me that's wonderful, because my dream was for Iran to be, and all its facets, I mean there's a lot more of my work, but that would keep everyone here forever, but to be shared and expressed, especially in the time that we're living in, where, every day we're kind of in this fear of war drums from this side and that side and the other side, and then the people that are in charge. So where are you supposed to go? So it's sometimes, I don't believe in nationalism, but sometimes we need a little bit of pride to kind of keep going. So and to go back to Iranian youth, this is another of the Champion series, and this is basically, I did this image with Gian because at that time the sanctions had they had come out again, and at that time the price of potato was like, I think it was like $10 or something like that, and my cousins were just fired from jobs because they were dealing with import, and it was affecting my family. And I because of the way that we're also connected in social media, I would see the youth, and it was important to kind of talk about heritage and culture and our fabrics and our textiles, and this is like a modern Silk Road, and these are both real Iranian youth that one's a tennis player, one's an activist, and she's studying to be a doctor, and how they have to deal with it. And it's also folkloric because it's the traditional village of my father, and Kurdish, kind of the pants are like Kurdish pants, and the layering is more modern. So, and if you're from Iran, you would recognize the pushtis, which is the couches, and they have the lace. And so this is also about pride, because it's important to show that, and it's also to show the beauty of our culture and the different textiles. And it's what's important also to say about that is that in Iran, the art of the Persian carpet is dying. And so I wanted to print it on hoodies that were synthetic to show that we're going from the hand into this synthetic world, but sometimes you have to deal with it. And so this is also another image that is really important to me because it's about heritage, and it goes beyond like art museum, and it goes more into like culture and promoting our culture within our cultural groups. And when you're told that you are banned and you're not allowed, you still can have pride and be stronger about who you are. And I think that's an experience that a lot of us have in this country, you know, at this point. And so that was really important to me. Okay, so it's important. Nostalgia is very big in Iran, and I do a lot of archiving, especially when my father passed away, because a lot of our history in Iran, especially queer history, is hidden and erased, and it's just beginning to come to light. So in the 1970s to 1980s, there was a very well-known variety singer and actor and performer named Feridun Farrokhzad. And he was very flamboyant, and he was very lovely, and I remember as a child seeing him with these like ruffled suits and sequins and like singing and swishing and preening like a peacock, and I was like, wow, I had no one to look to that was my, you know, there was no Iranian gay or flamboyant, you know, I had to look at these old history books, you know, and so this was amazing for me. So as I started getting into kind of unveiling my layers, I wanted to homage and tribute iconography to him, and it says Setare, and so this is a tribute to him. He was murdered in Paris, I think it was in the late 80s. It's said that it was the Islamic Republic of Iran. I don't know who it was, but I don't believe, he was murdered, and it's a tragedy because we have few heroes, and only some of them have voices. Often they have to be minstrels, but it's all we've got. So it was really important to have this, and I just recently got in touch with his family, and they were really happy with this, and so that was really exciting for me. And it's important to say in this photograph, the model, he just recently came from Iran. And when I pulled out this t-shirt, his face, you know, he was kind of like a jockey, and really he was like a bro. When he saw this, his face shrank, because he knows what this is, because this is part of the past that a lot of Iranians long to, and it made him sad, but then also happy. So it was really emotional and lovely. And what's important in this is that it's also talking about masculinity and that other space of masculinity. Because in Iran, if you are gay, you have to become a transsexual, or because they have Ayatollah Khomeini has this thing where basically you are allowed and okay. He have an edict that if you are gay, you have to be a true Muslim, so you must have an operation to become a true woman, or you have to be cured. So there's no space for you. So you don't, you know. So it's about keeping that space and proclaiming and claiming that space. That is the third space. I mean, because each one of these is a third space, whether it's women, whether it's men, whether it's trans, whether it's... So, oh, that's Feridun Farrokhzad right there. I'm sorry, I should have clarified that. That's his image, and that I collaged with rugs, and I got the rights from his family. So it was important because he doesn't exist, and he's very important in queer history. I think that when I posted this on some social media, I got comments. I mean, I'm always getting death threats and stuff like that, but like that's part of like life. But that he was not gay, he was not this. And I just was like, all I said was like, please stop trying to erase Iranian queer history, because we exist and we're not going anywhere. So that was important. And me saying these things, trust me, the fact that I can't ever go back to Iran is very difficult for me. I was raised here. I'm an American. I will fight for this country, but I'm also Iranian, and I feel that I should have the right to be who I am there and here. So when we're going into the third space, we're living in a time that a lot of people consider dystopia. I do, but I consider it also a hope for enlightenment. And we're surrounded by brands and slogans, and this image is very important. So when I was doing my first collections in New York, I worked with a makeup artist named Cyrus. And Cyrus was my best friend. And Cyrus taught me so much about Iranian history. Cyrus became fed up with the fashion world. I became fed up with the fashion world too, and I left because I was more of an artist. He moved to Iran, and through that edict, he became a woman. So Cyrus became Nikki. And this is one of my best friends and collaborators. And so recently I had a solo show at USC, a residency there, and she came and she flew, and it was very important to capture, because we had gone through this whole journey where I saw him as a man. He was not feeling, he was invisible, he was not comfortable in that space in New York, and then he went to Iran, he became a woman, he took hormones, and he still did not feel comfortable because he was relegated to bridal salons, like to do makeup there, because he was an incredible makeup artist. Now Cyrus is now Nikki and doing incredibly well in New York as a makeup artist, but still has a lot of issues with being a transsexual in the fashion world, which you would think would be ridiculous because of fashion world, but it's not. It's very difficult to be trans or androgynous or in that other space. And so this is Nikki in this bathing suit that I made, that's made with backpacks, and then this is all imagery of a slogan that I have made that's here to stay, which is based on to kind of a response to when Trump came out with the Muslim ban. And that was, it basically means we're not going anywhere, we're here to stay. And it's showing, like, it's using that imagery that is thrown in the face of, you know, when you talk about Iran, you're always shown imagery of like skulls and flags and bombs, and that becomes an armor, but it's also saying that I still am allowed to be here. So, and then these are, there's on a mannequin there. I hope that everyone would want to get up and look at them, because I want to talk about them, because they're live. So in a second, it gets us to product and how we're all commodity in this time. And so that's where barf comes in. It's a detergent in Iran that means snow. And so there's commentary on that. And this was just very amazing to have Nikki here and to do this photography with her. Okay, so this is great because this leads us into where, if you don't mind, we can walk to the mannequins. And but I just want to talk about this really quickly. Sorry. This is in Shia Islam, we have a theater of and pageantry called Tazieh, and it's a religious theater. It's very performative. It's very superhero. It's very costumey. It looks very alien, and it's a very intense thing. But what I do is I give it humor, and you'll see over there when we talk about it. So please, if you don't mind. This was all fabric. This was made for an artist that I work with, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, at the De Young Museum, and he's also Shiite, and he does drag and he does performance art. And so we wanted to talk about the insectification of Muslims and how we have basically been turned into beasts. And I just want to clarify one thing. I'm not one of those brown left that like hates all white people or believes not, because I believe that's nonsense, that's the reverse. I just feel like these are really important topics as we are being attacked to address and also laugh at and have humor with. So in Ashura, which is the kind of, there's a month of mourning, there's these banners that are embroidered and they have all these slogans that express the death of Imam Hussein. And there's a lot of flagellation and whipping and chains, and it looks like A Night at the Stud. It looks very S&M. Like when I show people that are my gay friends, they're like, are they like leather daddies when they see these images of these men in black beating themselves? And in Iran, it's become a point where the girls get black nail polish. The guys like get green, like they get like in the sides of their hair, they get Ya Hussein, like shaved, like, you know, like Banji, but in Iran. And so I wanted to bring to light kind of this imagery, but I changed it. And it was the insects getting power. And instead of this religious slogans, it says, Sob nazdik ast, which means the dawn is near. And then, Ayande va dunya mal mast, that means tomorrow we will inherit the earth. So it's basically claiming that space, independent of everyone, and becoming this bug, a roach. So this is my Khale Suske, and that goes back to folklore. Khale Suske was this childhood story in Iran about this little roach that had to find a suitor. And so she had to, and it was so, even as a child, I would ask I was like, Dad, Baba, why does she have to marry someone? And so she has to go to the butcher, and the butcher for me always represented like Iranian men that are like, you know, patriarchy, because they were like, I'll kill you with my knife, or I'll beat you with that. And, you know, so she struck out on one of her own, and then she goes to the mouse, and then she supposedly falls in love with the mouse. The mouse in Iran is often depicted as Mickey Mouse, so basically to me that is, you know, an opportunist coming into the country. So instead of that, I just wanted to make Khale Suske into this kind of after the apocalypse kind of superhero that comes to life and comes to power and uses all that pageantry and is proud of her roachness and beastness, and I think that speaks to that. This goes back to iconography and women in Iran, and how, for me, every time I hear that Iranian women, I'm looking at you and I'm seeing you, and so every time I hear that Iranian women are oppressed, yes, I understand, of course, I know, we all know, but to me, they are the heroes of our country. And I hand-painted all this silk, I stretched it on fabric, I cut it out, and this is the Persian pop gown. And this is a tribute to the women that sang the songs and the soundtracks of our lives in Iran. And so here is Marzieh, who's my favorite, actually. Here is Haide, here is, of course, Gugush. So Gugush is, for those that don't know who Gugush is, she's kind of like our god. Like, she, in our culture in Iran, she's like Edith Piaf, Madonna, Elvis, all those things put together. And her life was very difficult because she was kind of a vaudeville performer, and she was kind of abused a little bit by her family, and she had to perform, but she became a star in the late 60s, and her fashion sense was incredible, but her life was one of resilience. And the way that she looked, because we have to remember, I'm not just, I'm an activist, but it's about fashion, and her glamour was so intense that, like, it looked like Lulu de Falaise, which is Yves Saint Laurent's muse, but much more. And so I always, she was my first introduction to part of relearning my culture through videotapes in like the mid-'80s, and I just was mesmerized by her and all these singers, and they represent the songs that, like, when my father was alive, that my father would sing with my mother, and so this was an homage to all of that. And I use celebrity because the simplest way that I could put it is we live in America, and if you don't have a celebrity in front of your thing, no one's going to look at it. But it's also to pay tribute to kind of, hey, look, we have things in Iran that maybe you don't know about, and that you should learn about. And so that's that one. And so this is, so it's also textile work. Like, this is metal mesh, and I use a stencil, and I paint on it, and it gives like this kind of other dimension. And it's good that we're going to end up here. This is also Feridun Farrokhzad. This is his face that I did makeup on. And this hat is, I call this the breaking news, because basically at this point, the news is just pointless and we're tired of looking at it. So it's kind of it's also inhabiting that space of dystopia where we don't know what's going on, but we still exist. And it's important to talk about the youth, because I'm 46, so but I don't have any kids, but I often think of what we're leaving for them. And so this comes to Barb. I want to just take this off. So when you're Iranian and Middle Eastern and you're dealing with the art world or the fashion world or just identity in general, it's often your approach that you have to do things that are very Orientalist, which I do, but I self-Orientalize as a way of protection and armor. But this is when I kind of was getting exhausted of it and what youth have to deal with. And so barf means snow and pure, but here it means barf. So that's the humor and the pun, but it's instead of, it says Orientalism makes me barf. And what it's important to read about this, or to see, is if you come up close, right here, this is a silhouette of Khamenei, which is the supreme leader of Iran, and I use slogans that are from the actual detergent company. And in Farsi it says, Intikhabat ziyad, which means lots of choices. And we have no choice with the supreme leader, he's there. So, and he's basically, if you get up close, you see that he's boiling women's rights to death. And then over here, we have Trump, and it says, Sefidi ra ehsas konid, which means you can feel the whiteness. So in this time that we're dealing with, and these are bubbles with Trump because he's just a bubble, and like his bombs, and it's hard to be serious about this every day. So I think that approaching it with humor is a good self-defense mechanism, and this is the barf bag. And so a lot of youth in Iran are sick of like their pictures of their scarf and this and that, so it's like, fuck off, right? You know what I mean? We're human beings, we're not like your... So this was kind of this layered thing that I wanted to do, and it's about magic whiteness and purity. And so it speaks to that, that other space in very many different levels. And then if you're going to just want to look at that, and then I'm done. When the Women's March, before the Women's March, I should tell a quick story. I had a store in the East Village of New York for 5 years, and it was called Sears and Robot. My middle name is legally Robot. And I changed it. I was a raver. I became a citizen when I was 21, and I thought I was Astro Boy and all this stuff, which you saw pictures of. So in that store, there would be a lot of people that would come in, and the imagery that I had in the store was similar to what you saw with the women and the prints with the unibrow and the slogans. And a lot of my work was like this. Shepard Fairey's girlfriend would come in my store all the time, and then he would come in my store. And then when you're in that space of being this other, suddenly he started coming out with imagery. I am not the person that likes to point, and that was like these women in scarves, and you didn't know where they were with flowers, and it was just like, oh my God, what is that? Why is this white man So, but I didn't care, it was fine. Then the Women's March happened, and I created this for that, because it was very important for me at that time, because we were all going through pain of what happened, to show that we are who we are, and we can be Muslim here, and all the words here say peace, but it's using architecture that's Middle Eastern. And it's using motifs that are Middle Eastern. And it's expressing unity, but in a Middle Eastern voice. Because I don't have to wrap myself around a flag and that scarf to say that I'm American. It shouldn't have to be. It should be that you just respect me for who I am in whatever capacity. And it's a message of unity, because I feel that we are accountable. A Middle Eastern, Iranians were very responsible for all the things that have happened in our country, for sure. But that being said, we shouldn't live through this where wars are being waged, militias are being created, and then when the hand bites back, then we're blamed, and then we're bombed. So it's kind of this was an emotional moment at that time that Trump was, so it was important to me to speak about that, because I went through 9/11, I saw women in hijab being attacked, I would go in the subway, it was very difficult for me, and for me to go through that again, it was awful. So I wanted to have a beautiful image instead of that. We can talk about this. This is important. I made an outfit that was based on America, and it was Ronald McDonald, but it was inspired by, in fashion, we had a supermodel in the 90s named Linda Evangelista, and she would change her hair color every day. And me and Michael were obsessed with her, and Michael in drag actually looked like her. So this was my homage to him. When I first met him, he was at some underground rave party, and he showed up in a Ronald McDonald outfit, which you know. And so later on, years later, we made this leather dominatrix Ronald McDonald outfit that Linda Evangelista wore in Italian Vogue. That was like a dream for like two gay boys, it was a big deal, but we couldn't afford the magazine. So it's really about the struggle with capitalism and fast fashion, and how fast fashion has kind of destroyed the fashion world as well, because I am a designer and Forever 21 is not an option. I know it's hard, but so many things have happened, and we're still fighting and dealing with that, and it's hard to deal with it, and it's something that I stand up against, which is very hard because I make clothes and I have to sell them, and so I'm trying to figure out how to be, mindful, but then try to stay alive. But this is just kind of another aspect, because I just don't do Iran, but because it's diaspora, I wanted to show all the layers, and how the pop goes from different layers. And this is also a love. There's love in here. There is a celebration and a negation. And I think it's important to have that duality, because that really talks about that space, because we have to be able to reflect back on ourselves and, like I said, laugh. So that's it. Thank you so much.